What's going on, everybody? Wesley, Shoemaker, Aaron Parker back with you today with another episode of the Blue Gold Sports podcast. West Virginia will look to rebound from a close loss to 7th-ranked TCU. They hung with the Horned Frogs until the end, and they will look to do so against the last-place team in the conference, Iowa State, on the road. Before we get into anything, a lot of people, most of you have probably already heard, James Gamitter of West Virginia, his mother, Kim Gamitter, passed away suddenly this past weekend. So please just keep him, his family, in your thoughts and prayers. There is a GoFundMe if you guys would like to donate money their way. I believe you can find it on his Twitter or on his Instagram. So just had to get that out of the way. Obviously, our thoughts and prayers are with him and their family as well. Moving on just to more football stuff. West Virginia's coming off a 10-point loss to 7th-ranked team in the country, where I think they played one of their better games of the season, I think. There were a couple execution issues, especially down near that goal line there. But the biggest thing for me was the second half defense. We'll get into that a little later. But Mountaineers are in desperate need of a win. They are 3-5 now, and you've got 4 games left. You got to win 3 of them to make a bowl game. And it's not like you have anything easier than this week. So you've got to take care of business this week. You're going on the road. You haven't played well on the road in conference. So something's got to give at some point, and it might be this week for the Mountaineers.
Yeah, it's desperation mode for the Mountaineers and Neil Brown's team this week, but it's also desperation mode for Iowa State. I mean, they're in last place in the Big 12, and they're 3-5 as well, and they're coming off a home loss to an Oklahoma team that's been up and down. I'm sure, at the beginning of the season, Iowa State fans were probably expecting that one to be a W. So desperation mode for both teams, Matt Campbell and Neil Brown. And WVU is just going to have to feed off that performance against TCU. I know there was execution issues, a lot of things you can point at, but coming off a 48-10 loss, I mean, they played a pretty good game. You don't want to be complacent. That's not good enough. It's hanging around isn't good enough, but played a pretty decent game, and you gotta show up on the road. I think that's the big thing with Neil Brown's teams is, they don't win many road games, but half the time they don't show up. So you got to show up, and it's 3-5. It's desperation time. You got to give your best game out here in Ames.
Yeah, Iowa State 3-5 on the year, started 3-0, including a win over rival Iowa. Since then, let's just go through scores real quick. Number 24 Baylor, then at home, 31-24 loss. At Kansas, 14-11 loss, where they really should have won that game. I think they missed 2 or maybe even 3 field goals. Kansas State at home lost by 1, 10-9. And Kansas State's offense, after what we saw them do last week, holding them to 10 points. That's solid. At 22 Texas, 24-21 loss, and then Oklahoma last week, 27-13. So they've been in games with every team in the Big 12, basically. And Kansas State's near the top of the conference. Baylor, as we in Texas, are good. So they've hung with some teams there. So pretty impressive resume despite the record. And they're going to play defense. Iowa State ranks first in the Big 12, allowing 16.6 points per game. They've allowed more than 14 points only 3 times this season. So that's big challenge for the Mountaineers, and they will be doing it without running back C.J. Donaldson. Donaldson is out for the year. I believe it's a broken bone in his foot. That's my guess. He looked like he got stepped on live, and he had surgery. Neil Brown said it's nothing like a knee, but he didn't release the exact surgery or anything on it. But I believe it was a broken foot of that nature.
Yeah, it's unfortunate for the Mountaineers. I mean, that kid, came on the scene and proved that he was a star, and that he has the potential to do that for 3 or 4 years. So you just wish CJ the best, but you got to move forward if you're the Mountaineers, and Tony Mathis and Justin Johnson have to pick up the slack, but they've been kind of battling the injury bug too. So I think true freshman, or redshirt freshman rather, Jalen Anderson's going to have to step up, make a couple catches. I know he dropped a screen pass towards the end of the game.
That was a horrible throw too. He was going to get killed.
Yeah,
if he catches that ball, he's laying snapped in half right now on the turf out there.
Ball probably shouldn't have even gone his way, to be honest with you. But he's being forced into action, and he got forced into action in the fourth quarter last week. So those guys need to need to step up, and it's a little scary for the Mountaineers that Iowa State's defense is so strong this far because I see a very incomplete offense right now. I know I've talked a lot about the defense being incomplete, but the offense is not without blame either.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, which like the holes we saw with this offense, were execution in the red zone. And to begin the year, the Mountaineers were so good in the red zone, and then they have like a first and goal, and they run like it was just weird play call after weird play call after weird play call. You run a QB draw when you have JT Daniels, who has not had a designed quarterback run all year. Then you run a fade to Bryce on the left, fade to KP on the right, and you don't get anything out of it. So I just didn't really understand it. And this offense has to be better, and they're going to have to do it possibly without Tony Mathis, definitely without CJ Donaldson. So for an Iowa State team that's really good against the run, they are second in rushing defense in the Big 12, 115 yards per game. They've only allowed 5 rushing touchdowns all year, so they've got to step it up. Injury updates: Justin Johnson. Neil said there's a hope of him playing, and Tony Mathis, his status up in the air, TBD. Rashad Ajayi, cornerback, probable. James Gamitter out. Wyatt Milam will play. Doug Nestor will play. Jacoby Spells, probable. Lance Dixon, very doubtful, probably out. Mumu Ben Wahad, no real status update. He returned to practice this week. Davis Mallinger is out. So laundry list of injuries there, and there's going to be opportunity for guys. Jalen Anderson, possibly Marquand Ruckers. So in that backfield, you're going to have to be productive. I also expect to see Garrett Green take some snaps back there. I know it's unconventional, but expect Green to line up with the Wildcat and run the ball straight through as a quarterback draw, similar to what we saw JT do at the goal line while we are talking about it. Neil said he wants to get Green involved more, and he said they're going to have to be creative. So as you've seen, a lot of NFL fans probably Deebo Samuel type thing with him in the backfield. If you watch the 49ers, putting wide receivers in the backfield it's not like it's a crime anymore. It's not like it's a sin in the football world. So maybe not Garrett. Maybe you throw Bryce back there. Maybe you throw Sam James back there. That really wouldn't surprise me, actually, throwing Sam back there. So a lot of options, but just trying to get athletes the ball in space is the biggest challenge against this good Iowa State defense come Saturday.
Yeah, I want to see something different from an offensive a scheme here. Maybe going into Graham Harrell's playbook a little bit. The tunnel screen's getting old, so to see something different, I'd like it. Garrett Green looks pretty good. He looks pretty naturally good at the receiver position. I mean, he's got good hands. He doesn't have stone hands like some of what we've seen this year. So I like him to get more touches. I like Bryce Ford Wheaton to come up and do something bigger if he can get the right play designed to him. I mean, 1 touchdown in his last 5 games, kind of a garbage time touchdown against Texas Tech. So I like him to do a little bit more this week. So yeah, and get the ball to the talented guys, and I think that starts with Bryce Ford Wheaton and maybe utilize Garrett Green as well.
But I also think there's a point to that. As you said, tired of the tunnel screens. You can't force these guys the ball and predetermine where you're going with the ball. I feel like over the last couple of weeks, especially against Texas Tech, there was a predetermination of we're going to go here with the ball rather than waiting to see how things develop. And I think JT's a smart enough quarterback where it's not like he has to be a one-read quarterback. And I think last year, especially while we're on the topic of Garrett Green, when you had Garrett Green in the game, he'd be a one-read quarterback. He'd take one read to the wide receiver. If not, he'd tuck it and run. So when you have JT, who's more advanced, who's really smart, who's been around the game and been in this level of football for a while, you don't need to have these predetermined, we're going to throw it here. You don't need that. And I think sometimes Graham can get caught up in himself and caught up with all this play design and technique. But, I mean, against TCU, which is one of the better defenses in this in the conference, against Baylor, really good. Against Baylor, who stops the run magnificently well, they ran the ball down Baylor's throat. So you've just got to stick to your scheme, stick to what you do well, and not have all of this weird stuff, these weird plays that just don't make a ton of sense.
Yeah, they don't, especially, I feel like as I've watched this team progress, I feel like I said it on the sideline, last week. It's like, man, if you watch 10 or 20 minutes of film on WVU, I feel like you got them figured out. They run the same type of plays and with experience and Bryce Ford Wheaton, JT Daniels, Sam James, you don't need to be one read, like you said. And I'm not sure why Graham falls so in love with that tunnel screen. Against a good complex defense, especially Iowa State or somebody like that, it's not going to work. I mean, I don't know. WVU doesn't exactly have a Monroe St. Brown and Drake London, where they can just get the ball and go out in space and and all that. So you're going to need to be a little bit more complex than that. I liked what I saw at the beginning of the year with Bryce Ford Wheaton, like against Pitt. You just go one-on-one to the end zone, like let JT put it in his breadbasket. You don't have to limit him to just throwing it to the side 2 yards down the field and making Bryce run with it and hoping a receiver seals the block. I've just seen enough of that play, and I think if you watch any film on WVU, you're going to be expecting it.
Yeah, the problem is that you have really good athletes. It's not like you have no one to throw the ball to. You have Caden Prather, you have Bryce Ford Wheaton in the backfield. Like those 3 running backs, even like CJ Donaldson, Tony Mathis, Justin Johnson, those are 3 really, really good athletes there. And hopefully you get Tony back. Hopefully Justin Johnson's good to go. And then you have Sam James. Sam James is so underrated for his value that he brings to this team. It's phenomenal. So there's 5 guys I just mentioned. Throw in Garrett Green, that's 6. Like those are 6 athletes who have serious speed and strength and can do a lot of different things. So don't make it too complex in the ways of getting them the ball. Just get them the ball and let them do what they're good at, and that's make plays. And sometimes I think I'm not even trying to knock Graham here. I'm just trying to not sometimes offenses try and get too cute when you don't have to. And I think West Virginia sometimes is trying, like TCU at the goal line the other day when they had first and goal at the 1 and they did the end around, then they did the shovel pass and then they did the end around. And that made no sense. You run the ball straight down and through the middle and try and score. So some offenses just try and be too cute when you don't have to. Get your playmakers the ball, and that's what West Virginia has to do. Let's flip to the other side of the ball real quick, and I want to talk about this defense. This whole year, we've been saying, oh my goodness, this defense is horrible. Oh my goodness, it's 2012 all over. You know what I mean? So finally, they seemed to have their moment, if that's what you want to call it. They gave up 13 points in the second half to TCU. Those last 7, whatever. It's 4th and 1. You're putting 10 guys to stop the run. They go one-on-one, 50-50 ball. But a couple stats here. TCU in the first half, 10 first downs, 98 rushing yards, going for over 12 yards a carry, 234 pass yards, 3 of 4 on 3rd down, and 13.3 yards a play. If it's me, that sounds like this West Virginia defense that we've seen all year. In the second half, though, they kind of flipped the switch. 6 first downs for TCU, 2.9 yards a carry on 19 rushes, 3 sacks for the Mountaineers, 5.4 yards per play, and 2 of 8 on 3rd down. They had 162 total yards in the second half. Take out that 29-yard last touchdown play, and it's down to 133. So they did something that I didn't expect them to do, and that was play a lot more man coverage and bring pressure to the quarterback because, as we know, this defense's strong suit is their front. And I think a big part of that was Charles Woods. Charles Woods played every single snap on defense last week, and he's not 100%. He's still working to try and get to 100%, but he held his own against Quentin Johnston for the most part, who's a really, really good receiver. Will probably be first team or second team all Big 12 when it's all said and done here. So hopefully if you get Ajayi back and then you can rotate McCormick and Ajayi opposite of Woods. Raleigh Collins made a big play from that spear position with Mallinger out. So this defense, I think you're just tinkering, and hopefully they have some confidence, as this whole coaching staff said on Tuesday, and bring that with them from the second half, because the difference in the second half and the first half was huge on Saturday.
Yeah, you gotta like what you see at that point. I kind of like bringing Raleigh Collins, the true freshman. He looks athletic out there. Like you said, he made a big play, and Neil's at the point where guys are kind of dropping like flies as far as injury goes, but like as far as overall on-field play too. I mean, if you're not giving full effort, he's come out and said he's going to look at somebody else on the roster. So I like a guy. I like some young players to be paired with the veteran talent there with Charles Woods and Jefferson, Austin, and Dante Stills that. So Charles Woods, you got to tip your cap to him. I mean, he had a pretty serious injury. He had to get surgery. Like you said, he played all defensive snaps last week. Gonna have to line it up probably against Xavier Hutchinson this week. Probably one of the two best receivers in the Big 12, leads the league in yards. So I think Charles Woods is going to have his workload cut out for him, and hopefully he can get some help with the safeties if he needs it.
Yeah, Xavier he's the real deal. 77 receptions, 830 yards, 5 touchdowns this year. It's pretty good. And they try and get him the ball different ways, just like we talked about with what West Virginia should do. The biggest thing for me, though, with this West Virginia defense is that yards per play stat. Out of 131 teams, West Virginia ranks 121st in yards per play this season. And being a bottom 10 defense in yards per play, that's just awful. But then you're able to hold a high-scoring top 5 offense in the country in TCU to only 5.4 yards per play in the second half. So I think if you're this West Virginia defense, you have to be able to take advantage of the lesser opponent here in Iowa State and know that it is not this high-flying offense that's going to go score 50 points, and use that to fully figure it out heading into the final month of the season. And I think if you're West Virginia and you're in that defensive room and you're Jordan Wesley, I think that's your goal. I think your goal is to use this lesser opponent to figure it out for the last month.
Agreed. You got to use this as kind of a springboard, and no excuses at this point. We kind of talked about this previewing Texas Tech, and obviously two completely different offenses. Texas Tech is run and gun. They score points. They'll take 100 snaps a game and all that. But we talked about how they turn the ball over. Each of their 3 quarterbacks, or 2 that had played, Donovan Smith and Baron Morton, had thrown picks pretty much every game. And we talked about how the WV corners and secondary and safeties would need to step up and make plays because Texas Tech showed that they could turn the ball over, and they didn't make any plays. So here we go again with Iowa State, obviously a way less powered offense, but they turn the ball over. They throw picks. Freshman quarterback. They're struggling to score, like you said. They held Kansas State to 10 points, and they still lost. So you have to take advantage of this freshman that throws interceptions. Redshirt sophomore. Okay. They turn the ball over, and you're going to have to make plays like we talked about, pre-Texas Tech. It's Big 12. I know their quarterback is struggling, but it's a Big 12 quarterback, and more than likely it's not just going to come right to you. So you got to make the plays, and I like Charles Woods or Wesley McCormick to do that this week.
Yeah, 14 touchdowns to 10 interceptions is Hunter Deckers' line on the year for Iowa State. If you're West Virginia, 10 interceptions through 8 games, you've got to go get at least 1, maybe 2 this week, because you just have to. There's not a real reason for it. You have to be able to go make plays and prove you can do that. This defensive line, Dante go eat this week. So set the record for school record for all-time tackles for loss last week, which was pretty cool. Just moving on a little bit, talking about what West Virginia has to do to win. I'll go first, and for me, it's you have to keep the ball out of JT Daniels' hands. And pump the brakes a little bit when I say that. Versus Texas Tech, JT threw for 194 yards, 1 touchdown, and 3 interceptions. This past week against TCU, 275 yards, 2 touchdowns, an interception, and a fumble. And West Virginia wins this season. JT is completing 66% of his passes. In losses, he is completing 62% of his passes. And in wins, here's the biggest difference for me. He's only throwing the ball 30 times. In losses, he's throwing the ball 40 times. So when I say keep the ball out of JT Daniels' hands, I think you have to be more balanced. You can't rely on JT to go win you all of these games. You just can't put that much on him. I mean, you can't become one-dimensional. You have to be able to run the ball. And against a good Iowa State defense, who's second in rush defense, first in pass defense in the Big 12. I think it's going to come down to not having JT throw the ball 45 times. It's going to have him having to throw the ball 28 times, 32 times, somewhere in that range, because as we see, when they lose games, he's throwing the ball a lot more than when they are losing games. And so I think the recipe for success this weekend, especially on offense for West Virginia, is JT throwing less, West Virginia using more clock and running the ball more. And JT can still throw, he can still take those shots, but I don't want to see him throwing upwards of 40 times a game.
You make a good point, but just looking at it on the surface, no CJ Donaldson for the rest of the season. More than likely, no Tony Mathis. We're not sure about Justin Johnson. So I'm worried that they will kind of drop back and force JT to throw the ball 40 times. But you make a good point. You don't want that. You want a balanced game. But I do fear that they're going to force it a little bit with the injuries.
In fairness, though, to that point, I mean, that is a really good point. You also have some offensive line help back this week. West Virginia was kind of forced their hand. Doug Nestor was out, and James Gamitter was out this past week, but Milam will be back at full. Frazier obviously still there. Doug Nestor will be back, and then Hubbard on the right. So that left guard spot is a little iffy. I don't know. You've got to figure that out. Tomas Rimac, he played a little bit last week, but there's a lot of shuffling up there, and so hopefully you get some continuity back there. Excuse me, I'm stumbling over my words tonight. But you bring up a good point, Aaron. I think without Donaldson, it becomes iffy because, I mean, we saw against Texas Tech, they had CJ only in the second half, and they did just fine. So whoever it is, I think they have trust in. And whether it be Jalen Anderson, Tony Mathis, or Justin Johnson, I think they're still going to run the ball plenty on Saturday.
They should. And Jalen Anderson is a former four-star. We heard a lot about him coming out of high school. So I'm sure he's well equipped with the skill sets and knowledge of the game of football to go out there and play. Only thing is you're through the halfway point of the season and he hasn't got many snaps. But I've trust in him. I like this running back room. I know they're kind of dropping like flies, like I said, but he's here for a reason. People were excited about him, so I like him. As far as my kind of keys to the game, you got a talented defense, but for some reason I think JT's going to go out there and have himself a day. I'm not saying it's going to be some shootout. Iowa State's going to have a good defense. They're going to make stops, but I think it's going to come down to making plays early. I think WVU needs to go out there and establish themselves as the better team early. I mean, Texas Tech, you go out there and like one of the first plays of the game, you have an interception right to Aubrey Burks and you drop it. You got to get those plays early. Deckers is going to put it out there. And I'm sure there's going to be a couple plays where it's like, okay, it's a jump ball and you have to come down with them.
Or also, when you do make the play, you have to also then back it up. Like Ruffin gets the pick, huge momentum swing, crowds into it, place is going nuts, and then it's like the offense just falls on its face. So it's not only making the plays that are there to be made, it's when you make a play, how does the other side of the ball then back it up?
Yeah, you make a good point. That was so disappointing because it's like, man, Max Duggan, you look at him, 20-plus touchdowns on the year. Well, I think he had 19 before the WVU game.
I think it was 19-1. I think it was 19-1.
Yeah, 19-1, and he had already thrown a couple on the day, so it's 20-some-1. And he throws a pick with 3-4 minutes to go. You're at home. You got to capitalize, and they can't even move the ball forward. So I'm talking early in the game when Deckers puts it out. You got to win some of the one-on-one matchups. You got to be aggressive as a corner. You got to come down with it. I know that Burks play against Texas Tech wasn't some easy play, but you got to come down with those plays. Go back to like the Texas game. The offense went out there and did not perform well. Defense got killed. But early in the game, they had a third down play where it was right there, and a drop pass, maybe a bad read, and then you go for it on fourth and don't get it. Whereas on the flip side, you see a lot of fourth downs against the Mountaineer defense and they're converting. So you're gonna need to get those 3rd and 3, 3rd and 2 early. And if you go for it, you're gonna need to convert. I don't think Casey Legg is gonna win you the game out there. I think you need to establish yourself as the better offense because we know Iowa State has a good defense.
Yeah, and no disrespect to Iowa State, West Virginia is the better team, I think. I mean, yeah, they have somewhat similar records in conference and overall, but like West Virginia has played opponents like Iowa State's played close games, but West Virginia should have really beaten Pitt.
Oh
Probably
yeah.
should have beaten Kansas. Just that overtime was dreadful. And then they were down the stretch against TCU, Texas, and Texas Tech. Not even gonna argue those, but they could have 1 to 3 more wins on their season right now. And yeah, Iowa State saying they lost to 1, but to Kansas State, 3 to Kansas, 3 to Texas. But I truthfully believe West Virginia is the better team. They just have to finally go out there and do it and show it on the road. And we'll see if they can. That's the biggest. That's why you play the game.
Yeah, like I said earlier, I mean the Neil Brown era, they just haven't won many road games, and it's really frustrating when they go out on a road trip and don't show. I don't think it's going to be like that, but I do want to mention that the atmosphere at Jack Trice Stadium there in Ames is pretty underrated as far as definitely Big 12 venues go, even maybe nationwide. That stadium's kind of set up like Mount Pushkar Stadium. It's loud. There's not much to do out there. So they love to see their Cyclones, and if you're closer to Iowa City, you like to see your Hawkeyes. So they're going to come out. It doesn't matter that they're 3-5. It's a fan base like WVU. Doesn't matter that you're 3-5. There's going to be people showing up and being loud. So you can't lay an egg early. I don't think they will, but you can never rule it out at this point.
Predictions. We got 3 big games across college football world this weekend. Texas, Kansas State in Manhattan. Texas is a 2.5-point favorite. I'll go first for this one. I picked against Kansas State last week, and I really shouldn't have. They about 50-pieced Oklahoma State, and maybe they're the team to beat. Maybe it's not TCU. Maybe Kansas State's the one that might be holding up that trophy in Dallas the way they looked last week. So I'm going to take Kansas State at home. That's my pick.
Yeah, give me K-State. Deuce Vaughn is a stud. He runs past the secondary all the time. Once he hits a hole, he's gone. So give me them. Give me them at home after a big win against Oklahoma State. That was really impressive to me. I thought Oklahoma State would kind of run away with it this year, and that's not the case.
Alabama, LSU, in Death Valley. LSU is way, way, way overranked. They should not be a top 10 team, but that's a conversation for a different day. Give me Alabama.
Yeah, sitting at 10 or 6-2. I don't buy LSU. Sorry, I don't like Brian Kelly. I'll go Alabama.
And then the biggest one, basically playing for a playoff spot, is Tennessee at Georgia. Man, I'm a Hendon Hooker believer, but going to Athens and winning there is hard. However, Tennessee will do it. I think Tennessee's offense is really good. And Georgia's had some close games they should not have had this year, and I think something's going to give on that point. I think between those two quarterbacks, I think Hendon Hooker's better than Stetson Bennett, and I think that will be the ultimate difference. But that's going to be a live, electric, awesome game. It's at 3:30, right? I think it's.
I think so. Probably a Brad Nessler game.
Yeah, probably that 3:30 CBS slot. So. Same time as West Virginia, so if you West Virginia fans get bored, actually go turn that game on. So I'm going to take Tennessee, though, on the road, and they will punch their ticket to the college football playoff, and we will have a new dog, get it, because Georgia's the dogs, in the playoff this year with Tennessee after they beat Georgia this Saturday.
I really like Tennessee. I picked against them against Alabama. They've won 4 or 5 straight ranked contests. That's super impressive. But I'm going to go Georgia at home. They get the job done. They got the job done last year, taking down Alabama. I don't feel like they've dropped off too much. I know they've had a close game once this season, but Kirby Smart's a great coach. They get it done. They're at home. I think they'll win by 4 or 5 points.
Spread's 8, which is a little – Georgia's getting 8 points. Like, they're an 8-point favorite at home, which is a little surprising to me.
Ooh.
But anyways, to our game – yeah, to our game, I'll let you go first here. West Virginia, Iowa State. Take it away, Aaron.
I have not picked WVU in a while. You can call me a hater, I guess, but I'm going to go Mountaineers. Hard for me to pick the Mountaineers on the road with their track record over the last couple of years, but I'm going to go 28-24. Bryce Ford Wheaton, I think, is going to, he hasn't been bad, but I think, one touchdown on his last 5. I think he's going to get 2 on Saturday. I think there's going to be a couple rushing touchdowns. JT's going to establish himself as the better quarterback. I think that's what it's going to come down to. I think WV gets a stop late, 28-24.
Yeah, for me, ultimately, I think it's the talent separation on offense. West Virginia has the better offense, has the more talent on offense. I do think it's gonna be gonna be ugly for sure. There's gonna be stretches where it's gonna be ugly both ways, but give me West Virginia 23-17. That is my pick. So that will do it for today's episode. Mountaineers, Cyclones, ESPN Plus for all of you wondering. Bouncing around to other West Virginia sports, WV women's soccer got a win tonight and will be moving on to the Big 12 Championship. That will take place Sunday, 1 o'clock ESPNU for all you Mountaineer fans that want to tune in. And then hoops. It is back this week. Monday, men's gets things kicked off, and I think Thursday, women's gets things kicked off. So tipped off. Oh, mixing sports here. It is November, and it is a great time. Month left in the college football season. Hopefully the Mountaineers get it turned around this week. I'm Wesley Shoemaker, joined by Aaron Parker. If you made it this far, we do appreciate you listening, and this is the Blue Gold Sports Podcast.